the thing. One of the questions that comes up in every math class that I've ever taught throughout my career is, why do I need to know this? Okay? Literally, the most useful type of math that we do is word problems. What's interesting about that is that it's also the most concerning for you and stressful for you. The fact is, the likelihood of you using a step function in your everyday real life is probably very, very small. I would not quantify it as 0, but it's very close. Okay? But the truth is, in your life, you will solve word problems. You already solve word problems on a daily, regular basis without really writing them out and doing what I'm going to show you. What this allows us to do is we can create some manners, some functions, some mechanics in order to work through some of our problems that we have in our lives. Because that's what a word problem is. Now, are all these word problems going to be applicable to you? Of course not. However, the idea of systematically solving your own life's problems is the key to having a happy, healthy life. Because that's what life is. It's like overcoming problems all the time and minimizing them and eliminating them. And if you can come up with a good system to do that, to solve your problems, or the people around you, or eventually one day your kids and family and things like that, that's where this can be really useful. And one day you might own a business, you might work for a company, you might be trying to invent something. Inherently in all of that, there are going to be problems that need to be solved. Okay? And this is a great way to do that. Now, specifically for systems of equations, we're going to have a bunch of words, and there's going to be reading, and you're going to have to try to interpret what's happening and identify some things, and then come up with a systematic approach to solve that problem. Now, again, as we've said, many of the problems, the word problems, are not realistic. They're not practical. Nobody's carrying around, 500 apples with them, right? We've seen the meme. Have you seen that one with the kid sitting with a pile of apples? No. Like, that's not a real thing, right? Okay, right. But, again, the idea is we're going to practice. And then when we can get good at it, we can apply it to other things that are more meaningful. Now, here's the steps. I'm going to give you a list of steps that you will follow every time we solve a word problem. This is true not only for systems, but for all word problems for the rest of your life. Okay, from this point forward, I want you to follow these steps.
Yeah, that's a big thing.
Right. Well, I'm telling you that if you follow these, your stress level will go down because you're going to create a system to follow. And when you have that structure in place, you don't feel so overwhelmed. Because you get overwhelmed because there's so many things going on, you don't even know where to start. Right? Having a structure allows you to minimize those frustrations and anxiety. And that structure is going to be through something like this. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to identify your variables, oftentimes called creating a variable line. This is something you have to do for every single problem. You will have to do it on the test. If you don't, I'm going to take big points off. This is sort of the key to your map. Okay, if you're trying to investigate or trying to look at a map, okay, the legend or the key, that's what you're doing here. You're going to explicitly write out first of all, you're going to choose your variables. Most of the time, just because you're in the groove, you're going to be using X and Y, because you're just used to using X and Y, because why not? But some of you are a little more creative, and you go, you know what, they were talking about apples in the problem, so I'm going to use A instead of an X. That's fine. At the end of the day, all I'm asking you to do is tell me what variable you're using and what it represents. And in a system of equations, you're going to have two variables, and you're going to have to tell me what each of those two variables represents, and I want you to be as specific as possible. The more specific you are, the easier it's going to be to follow your map. Okay? That's the first part. The next part, of course, is to write two equations, because we're talking about a system of two equations. for each quantity discussed in the problem. So, see, the thing is, in every single system of equation word problem, there's two different quantities or concepts or ideas going on every time. Okay? And what you have to do in your mind, one, is separate those ideas. Okay, I'm going to have to write an equation about this idea, and then there's this whole other idea that I'm going to have to write an equation about. Every word problem is going to be set up like that. The part where it gets tricky is when they add extra stuff, and they talk about a third quantity. But you know there's only two things that you're looking for. So that's where it gets a little bit tricky. Okay? That's the first two steps. This is actually creating the map. Then it's following the map to get to the buried treasure or whatever, right? So at this point, right, I identified my variables, I wrote my equations. What do you think's next? Yeah, got to solve it now. Okay. So now we got to solve the system using your preferred strategy. Now, at this point, I have all the confidence in the world in your ability to solve a system by elimination. I have all the confidence in the world in your ability to solve a system by substitution. If your preferred method is graphing, we need to have a private one-on-one discussion because I might need to refer you to somebody. Like, please don't make graphing your preferred strategy. That's my point. Like, you shouldn't. No. Please, no. Please use substitution or elimination. Now, I will tell you this.
Someone's going to do it now.
I will tell you this. Those of you who have gotten good with your graphing calculators, you can use it as a check. And if you want to plug it in and let the calculator do the graphs for you, and you can see where they cross and go, ooh, all right, I did it right. You're welcome to do that, but please don't use graphing as your preferred method. Okay?
Substitution.
And honestly, the problem usually will dictate whether or not you will do substitution or elimination, depending on what your system looks like. Sometimes your system is set up to use elimination. Sometimes it's set up to use substitution. If you feel good about both, then use the one that makes the most sense that might allow you to get to the answer quicker. The last thing that you need to do, and this is the most important thing, is write your answer after you're sure you've answered the question. See, you can set up a system, and you can solve it, but it might not be asking for the value of x. The question might actually just ask for y, and so you want to solve for just y. It may ask for just x, so you don't even need to solve for y. It may ask for both. But the key thing is, you've got to reread the problem to make sure you're actually answering the question. Okay? And when you answer the question, I want you to be as specific as possible. Assume that the person reading it isn't really great at this stuff. Assume that you have to explain it in a way that anybody stumbling across this problem would understand. Okay? Show of hands. How many of you have used these strategies before when solving word problems? Okay. How many have not? Okay. So that's good. Most of you say you did not, which my hope is that this will really be beneficial. Okay? Now, the question that we're going to go through, please write or type it. Write it or type it. And then we'll talk about what's going on here. In this problem, so right, there's some things built into this problem that seem weird. He has to spend how much money? Not less. He can't spend more. He's going to spend exactly $100. Now, right away, we have to talk about and we have to identify my variable lines. Okay, and I need to know what two quantities are unknown. So, oftentimes the unknown quantities are the question that you're trying to answer in the problem. Not always, but often they are the question. Okay? So what's one thing I don't know that I need to find? Olivia.
How many bouquets for $7?
Okay, what are those called? Standard bouquets. So one of the things that I need to know is the number of standard bouquets that Ken is going to buy. What is the other thing I don't know that I need to figure out? Alex?
How many
How many deluxe bouquets? Those are the two things we don't know. If we knew that, we'd answer the question and we'd be done with the problem. Okay, so those two things that we don't know are our variables. Okay, and this is what your variable line should look like. I chose X and Y, you could have used S and D, I don't care. You just have to identify what you use. And when I say write a variable line, I want you to tell me what your variables stand for. From this point forward in the rest of your math life. Identify what your variable is and what it represents. The other thing that's important is X is not, in my case, just standard bouquets. I was very specific about it. It is the number of standard bouquets. X represents a number. I want you to be this specific on your homework and on your test.
You want us to write the number of standard bouquets.
You could just write number of standard bouquets, that would be fine.
What about hashtag standard bouquets?
Please don't do that. No.
Hashtag of?
No. Nope. Write the word number out.
Matthew.
Once we've established our variable line, we have to figure out how we're going to write our equations. And as I said earlier, there's two ideas, two concepts, two quantities that are going to always be discussed, at least two, in every problem. Okay? Look for symbols. Just read the words and figure out the two different quantities that are being compared, the two ideas that are being compared. In this problem, what is one idea that's going on here? Show of hands. One idea in here. Yeah.
Money?
Money. Cost. That's one. What's another idea? Number of bouquets. Are there any other things besides those two? Ideas.
How many?
Okay. So I need to write an equation about number of bouquets. That's going to be 1. Okay. We know that he's going to buy exactly how many bouquets? 10. Okay. Go ahead and write an equation for that. Okay. The fact that you're talking about money tells me you're not really paying attention. Okay. Again, this idea is we're talking about, we need an equation about the number of. We're going to get to one about money. We're just not there right yet. So go ahead and write that equation. We know that he has to buy 10. Or that he's going to buy 10. We need an equation that conveys that. Okay, here's the thing. Some of you are confusing the concepts between number and money. Okay? Everything in the problem that talks about money should not be included in your first equation. Okay? So when I'm talking about number of bouquets, all the numbers related to money in the problem should not be part of that equation. Okay? There are 10 bouquets total. Alright? How do I come up with that 10? Just in general, what do you do in order to come up with 10? You add the what kinds of bouquets? Right, so my number of standard bouquets and my number of deluxe bouquets will come up and equal 10. Well, we have a variable that represents number of standard bouquets. Right? What is that? X. We have a variable that represents number of deluxe bouquets. Y. So what's my equation?
X plus Y.
Okay, this equation is just about number of bouquets. Okay, the other equation that we have to come up with is about cost or money. So now I have to use all the stuff in the problem that talks about money. Okay, and many of you have already gone ahead and written that equation. But I want you to think about a general idea real quick before you actually do that. If you know the price of one thing and you buy several of them, how do you figure out how much money you spend on that thing?
Multiply.
You multiply every time. The number of the thing times the cost tells you how much you spent on that thing. That's a concept that you will use over and over and over again using word problems. Okay? And in this case, if I'm going to write an equation just about money, first I need to find out how much money I spend on standard bouquets. So if there are X standard bouquets and each standard bouquet costs how much money? $7. What's that expression going to be? 7x. So what's the expression going to be for deluxe bouquets? Okay, so those two added together has to equal how much money? Okay. Okay. How many had both of those equations? Now here's your system. Now you need to solve it. Some of you already did. Make sure that your answer is written out very completely. Again, think about it this way, as if somebody is reading it who doesn't know what they're doing at all. Be very specific about what your answer should be. Finish that up, please. When we had just a couple of equations, I was telling you, give me your answer as a point. This system has meaning now. When you actually answer the question, writing it as a point doesn't make any sense. Okay? We're trying to figure out how many of each type he can buy. Who's he? Ken. So you should start off with Ken.
I did.
Okay? So Ken can buy what?
4 standard
And?
6 deluxe.
Very good. So, now, here's the thing. I realize that some of you stopped and said X equals 4 standard bouquets, Y equals 6 deluxe bouquets. But that doesn't really answer the question completely. It's somewhat incomplete. Again, the idea is that somebody who stumbled across this situation could read it and understand what's happening, and also can read the solution. Okay? So I want you to be very specific in your answer. It should be a complete sentence. It should include the parties in the problem. It should include very specific amounts of information based on the problem. Okay? Am I going to take some points off if you don't do that? Probably, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, ultimately, you have 40 points worth of word problems on your test. So if you just follow this, you'll be fine. Okay? Make sure before you move on to the next problem, because I'm not giving you 30 word problems, I'm giving you 4. On your test, I'm giving you 2. I want you to take some time to step back a little bit and analyze. Have I answered the question? Am I sure I've answered the question? Have I used a complete sentence? Is it a complete thought? Make sure all of that has happened before you move on. You can also check your work on your own if you wanted to. Okay?